Thank you, everyone. I'm going to mute all of you now, and then Venkatraman sir can start. So, is it okay, sir? We can start, sir?
Yeah. Can I start?
Yes, sir. I'll mute everyone, sir, and then I'll unmute you to start, sir. We have crossed 100 participants, sir.
Okay.
So,
Can
yes,
I start? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Sharada Sharadamboja Vadana Vadanambujai Sarvata Smakam Sannithim Kriya. My dear well-wishers, my dear brothers and sisters, it's like speaking at home, from home, and with people who are associated so closely to our hearts. It's a pleasure. But before we actually proceed to discuss two interesting case laws for today's program, let's from our heart pray for all the departed souls, and also pray sincerely for those who are struggling redemption. And sincerely, we should pray for their speedy recovery, and also for the safety of each and every one of us in this globe. We should also from our heart express our greatest indebtedness to those for making us live safely or battling their own lives in the civil front, starting from a sweeper on the road to the most crucial power center. Everybody is working around the clock to make us all very safe. So let's all owe our sense of gratitude to each one of them. And whenever we get back to normal life, these are the people whom we should identify, recognize, and offer our salutations, and also whatever is possible for having given an extended protection to all of us. With these few words, I intend talking about two important judgments for the day. One is by the Honorable Supreme Court on this Calcutta Club. The other one is the Kerala judgment on Entry 54, which is now having an implication in various parts of the country, in various high courts. And let us, because it is completely exclusively a lawyers group, I chose two good, interesting law points for discussion, so that it is not only interesting, it is also educative, and I can also learn from each one of you in the process. There is a selfish agenda also in this. These are the two judgments, both from a constitutional angle. I thought we should discuss it. See, why these two judgments are not something else? There is a basis. In spite of the fact that we have a judgment of the Supreme Court in our favor, are we as professionals correct in advising a client that you can follow the judgment? Or in spite of the fact there is a judgment in our favor, should we to say that please do not follow this judgment, it's better you go and still pay taxes in your own interest? I chose this case only to discuss that aspect also. It's very interesting. You have a clear judgment in your favor today. All the residential apartments can actually stop paying GST. But can we take that risk? Is it worth it? Or what are the repercussions? This is going to be the bottom line of the first issue. Now, the second issue, as professional advisors, when do you recommend somebody to file a writ petition, and when you say you should not be? That's something which we should be very careful about in the days to come. When we all learned sales tax law through our seniors, we all stood for luxury tax, hotel matters, all these things, where most of the time it is challenging the levy, and most of the time we will succeed, and it will get validated subsequently. But the assessees were all ready to battle it at that point of time. But in today's business field, when between taking a legal decision and a business call, how do you actually advise? It's for these two reasons I chose these two judgments amidst several judgments, which each one can be discussed for hours. With this background, let me first take the first ruling of this Calcutta Club. Before I show the ruling, it's better I inform the ratio so that the mind sinks into the ratio, and let's see how this has graduated into this ratio. It's a larger bench of 3 judges, and the judgment was authored by Justice Nariman, where, to put it in just 2 or 3 sentences, Supreme Court says whether you are an incorporated club or an unincorporated club, you don't have to pay VAT at that point of time for the goods sold to your members, nor service tax for the rendition of services rendered to the members. And the definition more or less in GST is the same. And therefore, the ratio of these judgments during the VAT period, during the service tax period, and currently during this GST period will have a bearing to say residential apartments of, I'm giving you one example, residential apartments, then clubs. And even if you stretch it a little bit under Section 25 of the GST Act, where there is mutuality of interest between branches. So all these things, what will be the ramification because of Calcutta Club? It says it's a self-service and therefore not liable to tax. It says there is no sale or a supply and therefore not liable to tax. And they hold it on the one basic principle that mutuality has not been got over. And the essence of any such creation is mutuality. And having not got over that, it will not be open for you to tax the transaction. This is the bottom line. But I just gave you the conclusion first to open up so that we as professionals, if it's a trade body, we should take the conclusion last. But as we as professionals, we should put forth the conclusion first so that we stick to the mind and then decide where is it wrong. The inquisitiveness to inquire will increase if you know the ratio first. So now let's see the slide. There are only 3 basic facts which we should know. After that, it's all pure law. This is a case involving sale of food and drinks. And the club is a registered corporate body under the Companies Act 1956. Possibly at that point of time, it should be a Section 25 company. Now under the new Companies Act, it is Section 8 company. It should be the Section 25 company. And when it came to non-members, it charged tax. The issue was only relating to members. Now, before we go, this is the historical importance of this judgment. See, when deemed sale was introduced to the 46th Constitutional Amendment under 366(29)(a), the Law Commission gave its report on various aspects considering the prevalent rulings at that point of time, and also recommended why this should be construed as deemed sale to increase the tax base. But when it came to associations, the Law Commission actually recommended that this need not be forming part of the definition. The last 3 bullets will indicate the reasons. They very clearly say they are not money people, and cooperative movement, it will disrupt cooperative movement, and there is no scope for any evasion. Therefore, we don't recommend a tax to get over the young man's judgment in the case of sale by clubs or association. And they have, on principle, followed the English court's judgment and the Australian court, which it's there. The Australian court judgment, all these judgments have been referred to there. The principle is very simple. We all join together as members and pool resources. Then a relinquishment of those resources for a member of the same clan or a group cannot be construed as a supply or a sale. It is nothing but a relinquishment or a release of a right by the other members in favor of one. And it may even partake a transaction of money for enjoying that benefit. But nevertheless, it cannot be construed as a sale. And therefore, Law Commission recommended that this should not be taxed. But they didn't listen to the Law Commission, it's a different issue. But you just park this issue here. Then, this is the judgment which was got over by the 46th Amendment. A judgment by 6 learned judges of the Honorable Supreme Court. It went by the English principle, saying that all members of a club are nothing but joint owners. And because there is joint owners, they are all trustees. And it doesn't materially matter whether somebody pays X and enjoys X minus or X plus. And more importantly, in a transaction amongst members by an association, there is no contract between two persons and there is no element of bargain. This is one part of the ratio. It finally said 3 things. Transfer to non-members is sale. Transfer to members is not a sale. And more importantly, proprietary clubs transferring goods will be liable to sales tax. That's the difference between a cooperative club and a proprietary club. You own a club and you invite people there, and it's like running a restaurant only. Then you charge them. They are not members in the capacity as owners. They are members in the capacity as users. So in such cases, even then Supreme Court has said, proprietary clubs will be liable to sales tax. That position remains valid even today. It has not undergone any change. Now, these 6 judges got over the 3-judge judgment in the case of Enfield. Enfield was holding the field before that. That was a case of cooperative society, and it was a corporate body. It was not an unincorporated body, it was an incorporated body. And therefore, the Supreme Court said, once it is an incorporated body, then the club is distinct, the cooperative society is distinct from its members. And consequently, agency principle will not apply. The transaction has to be construed only as a sale because it satisfies all the 4 essential ingredients of sale, namely parties to contract, mutual consent, transfer, and consideration. Youngman distinguished this judgment. That's very important. It said, Enfield has proceeded on the wrong presumption that a body corporate is a separate person. It says they continue to be trustees and they continue to be agents. And more importantly, it said we can't make a distinction between an incorporated body and an unincorporated club. And upheld the view that proprietary clubs will continue to be taxable. There it did not interfere. So what Enfield brought out a distinction between incorporated and unincorporated club, 6 judges in Youngman overturned it by saying there is no distinction as such in law and therefore it should not be taxed. This prompted the Law Commission to prepare its report. And we saw the Law Commission report a few slides before, wherein Law Commission finally said, please, we don't recommend a tax because it is not evasion, it is not large, and it will disrupt cooperative movement. And it proceeded on the footing as though only unincorporated bodies are now being attempted to tax and not incorporated body, thinking that Enfield law is still a good law. This is exactly what has happened in the amendment. Before we go to the amendment, in this, let's close down the case laws, because some interesting, I feel there are some youngsters also in the group. They will also have an occasion to know the principle of mutuality. These are all wonderful judgments recorded by the court, which has been passed from time to time. See, we'll all be under the assumption a company is a corporate entity, a separate person, artificial. All this we have read even in our law colleges. See what Supreme Court says when it comes to a Section 25 company. I think all of you will know the difference between a regular company and a Section 25 company. A Section 25 company is more or less like a trust, more or like a charitable entity. The only difference between registering a body under a trust and in a company is, in a company you can run it as a commercial establishment, you can earn profit, you can do it and then file returns and pay. But still, you will not have dividend being declared. The objective will always be only philanthropic. You can do that even under a corporate structure. There are all, in fact, there is one institution in Madurai College, which is about 125 years old. 120 years back, it was started as a Section 25 company. So there are institutions which they have thought of even as early as a century before. Now, what Supreme Court says, even though company, the first principle is company is an artificial person, company is different from its shareholders. It says these are the exceptions when it comes to a Section 25 company. It does not first intend itself to carry on business. There are no shareholders, no dividends, no profits. And the admission is only by way of an admission fee. And remember, there is no transfer of shareholders' interest. And on seizure of membership, you don't draw any benefit. And therefore, it says a company, even though it's a company under Section 25, it will still be having the trappings of only a mutuality concept, and therefore a trustee relationship and an agency relationship is inevitable. Now, when it comes to the Bangalore Cup, it again brought out a very interesting dimension, one more interesting dimension on mutuality. It brought out two interesting expressions, contributors and participators, and said, as long as the contributors and the participators remain the same, then matter is over. Then there is mutuality. So the facilities offered to a members, who is he? He is the contributor. Who is he? He is the one who is participating. And the surplus, whether it goes back to him, not as a profit, but in case of say dilution or dissolution at a later point of time. And the contribution, as long as it partakes the character of a common fund into a single body, and no member gets back anything. All are equal, all have equal rights. And see, it is not necessary that it should be on equal terms. As long as there is a right over the surplus, then it fulfills the condition of being a contributor and a participator. And consequently, the test of mutuality survives there also. In the background of these four judgments, Enfield was one isolated judgment which held corporate bodies are liable to tax. It did not even deal with an unincorporated body. Youngman overruled it, also clarifying it applies to both. Then two other judgment, Bangalore and this earlier judgment, making it very clear, even in a corporate structure like a Section 25 company, mutuality will exist. So the essence is, because of mutuality, yes, a service or a sale or a supply by a club to its members cannot be taxed. Now, 46th Amendment sought to get over it. And it got over it assuming making one wrong assumption is what this court says finally in the judgment. The 46th Amendment, I'm going to show the slide in a minute's time, has chosen to deem only a supply by unincorporated club bodies or association as sale, and not incorporated bodies. It proceeded on the presumption as though Enfield is still holding and Youngmans have not overruled Enfield. So this is the first mistake which the Supreme Court seeks to point. Please see the expression in the article. A tax on the supply of goods by an unincorporated association or a body of persons to a member thereof for deferred payment or other valuable consideration. So the expression used is not tax on the supply of goods by incorporated or unincorporated. Of course, later, because of Ranchi judgment, an amendment was made in the Service Tax Act, which it's also addressing. And now GST, it says both. But it doesn't still matter, is what Supreme Court says, and why we'll come to it in a minute's time. So the Constitution has chosen to get over only in the case of unincorporated association and not in the case of incorporated association, as the bare words seek to convey. So the larger bench referred these three questions before it. And all the three questions put together is simple. Whether 46th constitutional amendment has got over mutuality. It's a simple question that needs to be addressed. And Supreme Court says the following. It first takes the statement of objects and says, I think the 46th constitutional amendment has made a big mistake in assuming incorporated clubs are taxable. Whereas the law as it stands is both are not taxable. This assumption is wrong and therefore woven. So it created the first chink in the constitutional amendment. And therefore, then it started to wobble thereafter. See, suppose it has been both. We don't know what call the Supreme Court could have taken at that point of time. But it found out one segment has been left out under the presumption that it is held to be taxable when it is not. So it also said in the process that the payment that is made for admission and the payment that is made for enjoyment does not partake the character of consideration. Then this is the most crucial aspect. It referred to one provision of the Income Tax Act, section 224(7), to say whenever Parliament wanted to get over mutuality, they have always got it over through a proper expression, through a proper deeming fiction. For example, the profits and gains of any business of insurance carried on by a mutual insurance company. So, mutual insurance company will always survive the test of mutuality, and you still want to tax the income between the insurers and the insured. And therefore, it says, see the expression used in the Income Tax Act. Show that in the Constitution 46th Amendment. 46th Constitutional Amendment has not got over mutuality. It only seeks to tax an unincorporated association or club. But that's not the point. You have to, the whole court, see, validation will come what? The concept of validation as held by several constitutional bench judgment is a court voices a particular view. And legislature is, whether state or center, is empowered to get over the judgment through a validation process and can even get over that retrospectively. But to do that, it should upset the basis of the judgment. Nullify the basis through a process of law. That is validation. So it says mutuality has not been validated, overruled or nullified through an amendment process. You are simply mentioning who is going to be taxed and not the underlying spirit which needs to be got over. This is a single line essence of the court. Now a question arose, all right, this is, they first decided the VAT issue. And then some other club, Ranchi Ginchi, everything joined. So they tested the case between 2005 and 2012 under the enumerative list and also post 2012 under the negative list. So they said it's all right that both have been, after 2012, both have been included, doesn't matter. Now today, how this definition, service tax definition stand, it says both incorporated or unincorporated, very well. But have you got over mutuality? That's the point. So, okay, that's the point. So as it stands today, both incorporated and unincorporated need not pay tax. Okay, what are the repercussions? Let's understand. So, first question which can arise in our mind is, why don't we recommend people not to pay? Especially, see, this question comes immediately to residential apartments. Because there are several residential apartments beyond 7,500 rupees and only about 30% they get ITC. Balance 70%, every resident or tenant or the owner, whoever it is, he's paying the balance 70% through cash. And therefore, everyone would have approached everyone saying that, can we stop paying tax? And one may recommend, don't worry, not only this Calcutta decision is in your favor, GST law proceeds on the presumption for furtherance of business. So where is the furtherance of business in this case? And therefore you have a good case, you can stop paying. That's one advice we can all give. But see the repercussions. When you have a gym, when you have a parlor, when you have a swimming pool, when you have yoga class, you have all these services being done in a flat. Then how do you say it is not in furtherance of business when you can enjoy this facility from club? You enjoy the same facility from a flat owners association. And people who don't enjoy this will definitely be a vanilla association, which their monthly payment would be definitely less than 7,500 rupees, which is exempt. So the position that it is not in furtherance of business is something which can be a gray area of doubt. This is one. This is view. I'm not saying this is right, this is wrong. We are only debating it. This is one. Now the second point which can immediately come to our mind is Section 25 again does not deem mutuality. And therefore, can we trigger that and say that, look here, it doesn't pass mutuality test, therefore interbranch, interstate, you may say federal and all, you go and fight amongst yourself, don't trouble business interest. Therefore, because Supreme Court has said, can you recommend this? See, the net, what I feel, this is more also to youngsters, because when we were advising at your age, there was better bandwidth for us. Now it's all shrinking. So compliance is increasing and it's all becoming more and more regimented. And therefore, the choice of advice to somebody to stop paying taxes is something should be a matter of last resort. And therefore, you should be very careful. If the payment is eligible for credit, then don't even attempt to say don't pay. It's not worth it. Whereas in the case of residents and all, there is no credit. So it's actually a cash saving. So can you recommend? That's the point which somebody can ask. Now, the only downside I feel is, if you see the Supreme Court, it says two principles. It says Constitution has not got over mutuality. And it says Income Tax Act in particular definition has got over it. So, does this require a constitutional amendment or only a statutory amendment? In my humble view, it does not require a constitutional amendment. See, what do you mean by a constitutional amendment? The constitutional amendment is also passed only by Parliament. Unless otherwise it has states' interest, it doesn't go for circulation, and where one half the states has to, and if it's a constitutional amendment, 2/3 have to approve it. Otherwise, constitutional amendments can be moved by the Parliament. It is the same Parliament who also enacts central laws. So it is not that Constitution is enacted by a Constituent Assembly. That was all there before the creation of the Constitution. After that, the power was always with the Parliament. So it can either exercise constitutional power or it can exercise sovereign plenary power of legislation. And Supreme Court says, you have got over it under the Income Tax Act, which is not a constitution, it is only a plenary legislation under sovereign power. So if they get over tomorrow, both retrospectively for those service tax regimes and also prospectively for the GST regimes, so how do we advise these people? What will then the president and secretary of that particular association after 1 or 2 years will be scrambling. Therefore, we have to be realistic. True, people will be after you saying that there's a judgment. Why don't you follow law? Yeah? That's their simple question. If we have a judgment, why don't we have the benefit? But we have to, as professionals, be very cautious and guarded in advising, oh God, this is something which they can get over any time and doesn't require a constitutional amendment. It requires only a statutory amendment. And that's why I picked up this particular case for discussion today. Prithvi, why don't we finish the question answer on this first and then go to the next one, yeah? If it's okay.
Yes, sir. As you feel, sir. I'll just... Yeah. If anyone has a question on this topic, we can start the question answer session now for this topic alone. Yes, sir. Satish sir is having a first question.
Yeah.
We can have this question answer round for 15 minutes, sir.
Yeah. Whatever time. We'll take 2 or 3 questions and then move to the next one.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
Because the next one is a completely different topic. That's why I thought I'll finish the question.
Yes, sir. As you said.
Good evening, Venkatraman.
Hello,
Fine. I just want to find out, what about this timeshare resorts? How will this have an application, this judgment?
See, timeshare. I mean, I have to review this agreement one more. I don't want to answer it after cup. I have appeared for State of Kerala against the timeshare companies, but there is no mutuality. I don't see a mutuality, ma'am. It's a separate company. It allots you certain rights. Okay. Does it form an association of people of all those allottees in a particular hotel for time to come? I think they allow you to enjoy any hotel anywhere with the contract is individual qua the particular entity. So it is a simple regular contract between a member and a company, and not necessarily a club. Even though they call it Mahendra Club, it is actually a hotel. So this is my prima facie view. But assuming that this is still within the mutuality principle, the guarded advice: if you are appearing, if a individual timeshare holder comes to you, you may have to say, go and fight, don't pay. If the hotel comes and seeks you an advice, you have to say, please don't stop collecting, because they will amend the law.
Okay, thank you.
So we have one question from one of our junior members.
Yeah, please.
Sir,
Rohan, yes.
One question that I had is the differentiation between a proprietors club and a members club. Is that differentiation diluted when we talk about a corporate club or a body corporate providing a service to its members? Like, is there an overlap there? Is there a contradiction there in that sense?
It's a very, very beautiful question. I must congratulate you. It's a very nice question. See, what they are trying to, if you see the judgment in Bangalore Cup, it was not a company in its normal business form. They were dealing with a Section 25 company, and if you go to the memorandum of Section 25 and how it gets created and how it operates, it is actually the test of mutuality is closely held, interlinked as part of the legal process. That's what they say. There is no subscription, there is no dividend, there is no profit, there is no transfer of shares, there is no dividend. You can neither sell the shares nor enjoy dividend. That's the primary right for a shareholder. So when you don't enjoy any of these things, then it basically has all the trappings of a trust or a society, and therefore mutuality will apply. That's the stand they have taken. Whereas in the case of a proprietary concern, you don't involve anybody else. You are a sole owner. The rest of the guys don't have any scope at all, and therefore I don't see an overlap in terms of the lines of distinctions Supreme Court has drawn.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Rohan. Sir, can we take up 2 more questions, sir?
No. Please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Jay Kumar, sir, you're next, sir.
Okay. Sir, good evening, senior.
Oh, namaste, Ji. Okay.
Kandipa, you
can turn on your video, sir.
Sir, my question is, after the Schedule 2, which is deeming supply of services and supply of goods, in Schedule 2, there is an entry under serial number 7, which says, the following shall be treated as supply of goods, namely, supply of goods by an unincorporated association or body of persons to a member thereof for cash, deferred payment, or other valuable consideration. Now, they are deeming this first, there are 3 points I want to make. This is one, they deem as supply of goods by an unincorporated association or a body of persons to a member thereof for cash, deferred payment, other valuable consideration, number 1. 2, the basic definition of supply under Section 7 has a separate limb which says supply includes A only has supply in any forms of supply for a consideration by a person in furtherance of business. Whereas I think it should be 3 or 4, where it says activities under Schedule 2 is deemed to be a supply.
Correct. Even if it's not for business purpose, you are right.
And the last part I want to refer is the definition of a business under GST. There is a definition of business under Section 2. Just a second, I'll just go through it. In that, business has been very specifically captured. Yeah. 217 is a definition of business. And it says business includes, of which subclause H, no H, it is E. It says business includes provision by a club, association, society, or any such body for a subscription or any other consideration of the facilities or benefits to its members is deemed to be business. So, furtherance of business is also maybe, this could take care of that. And deeming it a supply can also be taken care by Schedule 2's deeming provisions. And supply includes this Schedule 2 activities. With these 3 amendments or these 3 provisions in GST, whether it will have still that mutuality.
Yeah, the problem is, see, it's, in fact, you have put the question nicely for me to answer it. See, the answer is like this, Jaykumar. You see all the 3 amendments, even in Constitution, it's only a deeming fiction. What was not a sale is being deemed to be a sale. And they use the same expression, supply for consideration, etc., by an unincorporated body. Now you include incorporate, no problem. Supreme Court finds that you have mentioned the status of the entity, not the underlying transaction. And similarly, you have only said something which is not a business is now a business. You have not still got over the test of mutuality. This is exactly where they're coming. But if you go little deep, this judgment can be deferred. This judgment can be questioned on the ground when you say such an entity which is otherwise conceived to be mutual, such an entity is liable to tax. Then how do we now distinguish only the overlying status is deemed, not the transaction on this transaction is, it's like saying the individual and his ability and his capabilities are different. We never read history that way. The individual and his capabilities always go together.
Correct.
Similarly, a creation and its capabilities go together. So when you say the created entity is deemed to be doing a sale or a service, where is the need to say the capability should also be deemed to be a sale? This is one moot point which was not argued.
Correct.
And it can always be, tomorrow there is a problem, some judge of 3 judges can even say that we disagree for this reason. So to that extent, this judgment is vulnerable. But let us assume that it is okay. Today it's a law. Even then, business definition or status definition may not be adequate enough because they say you have not got over mutuality. Can we still advise people not to pay? I would personally say we should not recommend. Especially when the last mile payment comes from individuals whom we cannot be going and chasing later. So,
thank you.
Sure, my duty. Pratik, go to next subject, or is there any?
Last question, sir, with your permission. Srinivas sir wants to ask APS.
Oh, how can you say no to what is
yes,
this?
Sir.
I was voting first, yeah. APS.
Almost similar, sir. Your sir given idea for filing new kind of writ petitions. As of now, they filed writ petition saying that whether they have to pay maintenance over and above 7,500 or even less than that. Now they have to file challenging the maintenance itself.
You have to challenge the levy, but you better press for stay. I would come and argue for stay if you want, because why are you putting the presidents and the secretaries into doldrums?
Yes, sir. More repetitions will come. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, we can move on to the next one, sir. I think we're done.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Hey, Balaji. Hey, Balaji. 1 minute. I don't know how to. One minute.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. See, this is again a very interesting question. I thought I'll take it up for deliberation because it's amongst lawyers. Let me put the basic first and then take you to the questions that is being fought. See, the basic difference between all the earlier laws, say customs, service tax, excise duty, central sales tax, and VAT. Customs is still outside the bucket, so we'll take it out. GST, service tax, excise duty, and the VAT. VAT was exclusively with the state, and the other three was exclusively with the center. Now, for the first time, we have found out a beautiful convergence through Article 246A, where the same triggering point for levy, charge is one, but tax is by two partners. This is a historic achievement by several governments over 30 years to reach here. So you tax it on one transaction on a charge of supply of goods or services, and both the federal partners will take their share equally. It's a very new invention. More than 246A, 279A is a far-reaching constitutional amendment. One of the greatest breakthrough we have done as to show to the world that we are a very mature democracy. We have done, in some other occasion, I will talk about 279 separately, because we have done a lot of research and intense work in this area to present it to High Court judges in the National Judicial Academy several times. Now, politicians have discharged their duty of bringing state and center together. And politicians constituting the GST Council has also trying to run it the best of their ability, setting aside their parochial interest and thinking of the trade's interest. But high courts tomorrow, while dealing with the law, should not view more from the regional aspirations. They should always consider GST at a national level. One nation, one market theory. After great difficulty, we have reached here because, for take China, they were taking away many of our contracts from us on the only ground that the last mile taxation in India, you have to go to 25 different authority with 25 different rates, and you will never be able to do business. So manufacturing setup was a big challenge. So all this is got over finally by GST. Court should also appreciate this spirit while delivering judgments. That is something, even if revenue argues it to the contrary, we should be able to highlight. Therefore, we have done a presentation in 279 separately. I'll do it on some other day, not today. We'll take this issue. So the point is, when 246A, the beauty of 246A compared to all the earlier constitutional entries is, see, our constitution has always been interpreted to say, the power to legislate comes and flows only from the constitution, and entries are only fields of convenience. And there are many occasions that the power to legislate and the subject to legislate both will be found in the constitution itself. You don't have to go to the entries. This GST is one such law. It's very unique in tax. For example, take excise duty traceable to list 1 entry 84. Take customs list 1 entry 83, 83. And take income tax list 1 entry 82, CST 92A, service tax 97. Then there are several taxes in the state, several taxes between say 48 to 62. All these are state levies. So there are fields identified in the list. Whereas GST is one law where you don't have a field of legislation in list 1, list 2 or list. You can't go and find out, you will not find it. That has been embedded in the article itself. If you see 246A, it uses the expression, notwithstanding anything contained in Articles 246 and 254, Parliament, and subject to Clause 2, the legislature of every state have power to make laws with respect to goods and services imposed by union or such state. So the question may arise, sir, it says only union or such state. So how do you say it is a cooperative federalism, a joint levy? Tomorrow union can always pull out or state can always pull out. No, they can't pull out. You can't read 246A in isolation. You have to read it in conjunction with 279A, which forms, and the GST body, unlike empowered committee, GST is a constitutional body. And there is a voting right, so 2/3 versus 1/3, and it's a process. So both articles put together enforces the doctrine of cooperative federalism. It's a new, see what was conceived by Part 13 as a self-imposed discipline by states is not brought out through a constitutional compulsion. That's the beauty of GST as a law. Okay, so this background is necessary for taking you into the problem. So when this new avatar comes, you must first figure it in your mind. The field of levy is now goods and services together. It is no longer goods or services. It is goods and services. That is figuring in 246A. This has come into effect, rightly or wrongly, from 1/7/2017. Now, when it came, so what happened? They brought what is three things happened in the Constitution, bringing the 101 constitutional amendment. That is phase 1. In 2016, they brought it 16/9/2016. The second, in that there's an article called 19, which allowed transition provisions for 1 year, which expired on 15/9/2017. And the third phase, it allowed India to operate under the GST provision from 1/7/2017. These are the three stages. Now in stage 1, it did the following constitutional changes. If you read entry 84, you will find now entry 84 is shrunk only to 6 items and not more than that. Similarly, if you come to entry 54, it is also shrunk only to 6 items and not more. So rest of these items have been taken away from the respective list and they have been now brought, this should be remembered every time, brought into 246A as goods and services together. So where do they lie post 1/7/2017? They lie only in under 246A. They don't lie anywhere else. It's all gone. So this amendment has come on 16/9/2016. That should be borne in mind. Now comes the transition provision. The transition provision allowed a sunset period of 1 year for transition. So between 16/9/2017 and 15/9/2017, or whenever that particular state or union passes the GST law. Take, for example, Kerala passed it on 22nd June only. West Bengal passed it possibly on 28th June. So whichever it is. Till such time, the transition provisions will operate. The moment the law gets passed, then the transition sunset clause of the transition provision will trigger. So this is a transition provision with a sunset clause for a limited period in operation. Consequently, please go to the previous slide. Entry 54, as it stood then, even though it is shrunk and amended, has been saved by the Constitution through Section 19 of the 101st Constitutional Amendment for a period of 1 year or till such time the state passes the legislation. Up to this, I think there is no confusion. Now, if state passes the legislation, the moment it passes the legislation, Section 19 to that extent will abate for that particular state or center. And consequently, the transitional provisions will also abate. Therefore, what are the consequences? Your entry 84 is dead, buried, and gone. And your entry 54 is dead, buried, and gone. It's not there anymore in the Constitution. But I have to make one caution. between the union list and in the state list. I have chosen to, my office would have filed for even excise duty. I have a reservation when it comes to excise duty and service tax, being a union levy and there is a residual entry. But there are judgments to say, if it had been in the earlier list, then any mutation can't directly get consigned in entry. All that is there to develop. I'm not saying it's not a bad case. But prima facie, I am now confining the discussion only to entry 54 and not to 84. I want to make that point very clear at the threshold. In entry 54, there is no residual entry in state list because the constitutional bench several times have said the hierarchy is go to list 1. If it is not there, go to list 2. If it doesn't fit under list 2, then go to entry 97. Now, they can't say after the burial, union gets the right under entry 97 to impose any tax. That is far-fetched. For excise duty, there is a proximity. Here, you can't say union entry 97 is a basket still available. Then, do you mean to say VAT will be levied by union for the earlier period? That's the question. Therefore, to that extent, it stands buried once and for all. So once the constitutional power is gone, see, all of us know how do you legislate under the Constitution? Constitution is the mother rule book. It's the Bhagavad Gita or the Bible or the Quran. Now you have to draw power from there for you to sustain a statutory enactment. So when that book says you don't have a power, can you, by a legislation, sustain that and say that I have legislated a saving and repeal? For example, so this is the effect of sunset clause. So this was the question which we posed before the Kerala High Court. I didn't extract the provisions. 174 is all of us know. Saving and repeal and saving clause is something which you are all very familiar with. So let me bring out a difference here also. When we transited from GST, TNGST or KGST into VAT, KVAT or TN VAT, we had a similar issue of saving and repeal, and the matter went to the Supreme Court from Andhra Pradesh in the case of GE, and it was upheld. Why? Because it was upheld. Saving and repeal is always inherent to a legislative practice, legislative power. Saving and repeal, as repeal is a sovereign right, saving it is also a sovereign right. Therefore, it is intravirus. But there was no problem there because entry 54 was always there. But today, what are you saying? You are saying, citing the same 174 to say, like a VAT Act, I have saved the law. All show cause notices are saved. All demands are saved. All pending appeals proceedings are all saved. My right to issue show cause notices for those periods prior to 36/2017 stands saved. When all these things are saved under saving provision, what are you coming to? What are you teaching us before a court to say you have no right, nothing? We don't understand this language at all. This is the defense state takes everywhere. The simple point is, where is your source of power after 1/7/2007? Please show us the source of power. Now Kerala answers it. Source of power is 246. I'll answer that. We argued with the division bench. I'll tell you how it may not be correct. 246 is not an answer, right? For a minute you think so. I'll try to assist you a little later. Right now 246 is not an answer. If it is so, where is the source of power? This was the question. No, you just can't raise a constitutional question without giving propositions. So we placed 5 propositions. Proposition 1. The simplest one-line article in the Constitution, Article 265, which is generating 22 lakh revenue every year for the government of India. So to the union. So no tax shall be levied or collected except by the authority of law. So what do you mean by authority of law? There are several hundred judgments, at least 8 to 12 constitutional bench judgments. In fact, classic treatise, they are all referred to Whitney and all those judgments, where they have said when you say authority, there must be authority at the stage of levy, at the stage of assessment, and at the stage of collection. Levy is a legislative exercise, assessment is a quasi-judicial exercise, and collection is an executive exercise. It should have authority in all stages. Therefore, can we say, can revenue card stand up and say, I have issued notice, I had the law, I know why notice, Supreme Court has decided the case and you are all in a recovery stage. Yeah? How can you stand up and say, I can't recover? There's a judgment against you. Can you argue? Because you should satisfy all the three limbs to sustain a levy under 265. Otherwise, it's invalid. Completely invalid. Is one possible proposition which we have built, saying that authority would mean authority in all the three stages. You can't say I had a law. You can't say I have crystallized a demand. Even bank attachment has been made, but it has to be only enforced. It becomes dead. This is the power of 265 is what Supreme Court says. It's proposition 1. Now, proposition 2, we placed 3 articles of the Constitution before the court. Article 395, which is an article for repeal in the Constitution itself. It repealed 2 earlier enactments, the Indian Independence Act, and of course the famous Government of India Act, which we all know. Government of India Act is the act which was actually running, actually in close with Constitution. And many of our constitutional provisions have been drawn from the Government of India Act 1935. The question of entry, state list, all this, a lot of things are derived from Government of India Act only. So these acts were repealed under 395. Now, there is a special power given to the president. There are several clauses to 372. I'm just putting only one clause. It enabled, notwithstanding the repeal, it enabled the president to hold it till such time a law gets passed. All the laws in the force in the territory of India before the commencement of the Constitution, all the laws in force in the territory immediately before the commencement of this Constitution continue to be in force. So there was a limited saving. President was given the power to save it. It's an automatic. That it got, this is automatic. Subclause 2 is presidential power. So all laws, though repealed, got saved. Till such time, it is interfered with. But there is a third provision, 367. This is we can do a 3-hour lecture on 367 alone. When we did the Article 370's speech, we worked on this. It's a classic article. There's so much of material available on this, under this article and discussions. 367, where how to interpret the enactments prior to the Constitution. Because the easiest answer which revenue will try to throw up is, hey, come on, here we have the General Clauses Act. If something is not saved, we will use the General Clauses Act. So question is, whether at all you can use the General Clauses Act to save a provision in the Constitution. When General Clauses Act is only a statutory enactment, can it save a provision in the Constitution? It's a debatable point. It can even possibly be argued you can save it. The point is, you can't rely on 367 as a power to defend. Because 367 is not, again, a saving or repeal. It's an interpretation clause. And it also says interpretation only when it is required, subject to other provisions. And Law Commission has dealt with this article in a very detailed manner. 40th Law Commission report, or 14th Law Commission, I don't remember. It has said that this will apply only for enactments passed by prior to the Constitution. So, can you be doing this? Using these 3 articles will not be of any relevance or use to say, we have somehow saved entry 54 somewhere. It is all in the cloud. We can always draw like blockchain technology. We can't do any of these things. Now, in fact, I have referred to the 60th Law Commission, which says that this is all applicable only for old enactment. Now, Proposition 3. If you take the Constitution, not all the, we went through all the 100 amendments before the 101st Amendment to place this point. There are amendments carried out in the Constitution, like Panchayat rights, which is devolution of power to Panchayat, cooperatives and all. So what happened to those cooperatives and panchayats as they were in existence on the date of bringing this law? So Constitution conceived a saving mechanism. They have saved several such articles. 243, clause 29(2) of 243 is one clause. Then if you say 243(n) is yet another clause. Then 305, this was for princely states, privy purse. 305. And again, 243 is at T. So you have 4 clauses, at least, maybe much more also, where Constitution has said after repealing a particular law. So when you do so, why haven't you saved entry 54 to enable people to complete pending proceedings or to initiate show cause notice within time limit? See, there is a difference between this case and what we won recently in Kerala, which has been followed also 2 days back before the Gujarat High Court. Those are all cases still more proactive. See, these are all we are fighting only saving and repeal. You know what Kerala did? They amended the VAT law in the GST regime and extended the period of limitation beyond saving and repeal. So whether that power is exercisable, but it was, we thought it's a cakewalk case, but it was not cakewalk. We had to sweat it out because enough jurisprudence has developed even in that area. Enough jurisprudence has developed even in that area to say that you can't come to a conclusion so easily. But the judgments were very clear that saving and repeal will not include amendment power. So we produced all those judgments, and the Justice Jaishankar Nambiar wrote a beautiful judgment on that. So that's a separate question. Now we are on repeal, that's all. So 243 ZT is one more. Now we come to the 4th proposition. There is a principle, even suppose you want to invoke General Clauses Act. All right, you still can't invoke it in this case. For the simple reason, General Clauses Act won't apply for temporary statutes or statutes which have sunset clauses. There are a number of judgments. Because you'll be nullifying the whole spirit. You bring an enactment for 5 years and it dies a natural death on the end of the 5th year. Can you be standing up in the court and Section 6 says Section 6 still saves it? When the purpose of the act is, or the provision of the section or the rule is only for a particular people. So a sunset clause, you can't invoke General Clauses Act. So our case was Section 19 is a sunset clause. You can do it only for 1 year. So when you can do it only for 1 year, how can you expand it? And this is one theory. And then the last proposition was, even amongst repeals, repeals are of 2 types. Repeals in the nature of omission and repeals in the nature of substitution. The basic difference between a repeal in the nature of omission is you actually exclude a subject. And the nature of substitution is you exclude and still legislate. So you reform it, you deform it, you amend it, you add, you do something to it. Therefore, courts have drawn a dividing line. However thin it may be, it's clear. General Clauses Act may apply for omissions per se, but will not apply for substitutions. Of course, substitution, prospective, retrospective, retroactive, all that is a different debate. So there are judgments to say that you cannot do it. So, and to argue this point, we placed at least 29 to 31 constitutional benches. See, none of the pleas were argued just at a principal level or at a just a point of view. These are all labored with case law support. 31 case laws of the constitutional bench were filed. It was argued for 6 days because it came before Justice Naidu. Seshadri Naidu is one of the finest young judges today country has. And we must know his antecedents. A man who had so much love for English and did not have the capacity to go to an English school. He heard whatever possible through a radio, whatever was broadcasted in English. That was his connect to the language. And today, see his judgments. What a flow, what a flawless way in which he describes things. So, it's a great reach for him. We should really compliment this judge, a very nice and a patient judge. So, he delivered a 150-page judgment against us, of which, in fact, I said this to him also, therefore I don't mind saying it. I said this to the division bench also, of which 148 pages are actually in our favor. He agreed with all the propositions. And finally, in 1.5 pages, in 2 paragraphs, the learned judge only says, all that is fine, Venkatraman. You still can't win this case because 246 is good enough to take care of the situation. There is 246, and you go to the 246 gives you the source of power, goods and services. Source of power, there is a GST Act, both by the center and the state. And go to that Act, section 7, which is a charging section. Read that section. It says supply includes sale. Therefore, there is a definition of sale. You pay tax. This is all the judgment says. Now, our question is, this sale appearing in section 7 as part of the definition of supply is traceable to 246A, not the entry 54. And 246A cannot be retrospective. You can't say it travels back, which means every VAT levy will now be shared by union and state, and every service tax revenue will be shared by union and state. No. So the definition of sale appearing in the definition of supply, the source of power is not 54, it is 246A only. It terminates there. How do you read it into 54? Unless otherwise, you have to now say 246A occupies even for the earlier period. That is why I said that, because the challenge can be, see, look here, 246A uses the expression or, state or union, definition of sale. So state can levy even for those periods under the new legislation, for which you cannot do it because you are bound by some philosophy under 279A. You have the power, but you don't have the power to act indiscriminately. If you want to act, see the beauty of 279A in one sentence, I'll say. We'll have a lecture some other time. One sentence 279A is a beautiful fruition. Hereafter, each state cannot say, I will veto it, get lost, I'll go and do something I want. Even though it doesn't flow so clearly, but the philosophical commitment is that it cannot do it. Why? Because it is a forum where the entire scope of what they can do is flowing from 279, the subjects. And it has to be done together through a voting right, in which 2/3 of the vote is to the center, states, and 1/3 to the center. So if a state has an objection to an amendment, it should ensure it should muster 2/3 interest. So one state cannot simply throttle or wobble the GST Council. See, there's a big tug of war going in lottery. Only 5 states are imposing lottery as on date. And lottery, local lottery rate, and they want a higher rate for people who come from outside the state. It's not happening. But when somebody asked for an advice, I said, you don't see why the problem is if you do it once, then that becomes a habit. But states cannot run their machinery without lottery money. Liquor and lottery is the only big kamajenu for any state. Now, if you still want lottery to happen, go and amend the law and create the exception. Don't do it through a GST resolution. Then tomorrow every state will come. Everything. Some will say egg is precious to me. Some will say mineral is precious to me. Then there's no end to it. So go and amend the law, create the exception for lottery, because it is something which has a direct impact to revenue. Otherwise, you cannot do it. States are struggling. 5 states are every time knocking on lottery. The matter doesn't get, because rest of the states do not do lottery business at all. And 4 out of the 5 states are in the Northeast, where the lottery money itself is some 50 to 100 crores, which many, in fact, one, I cannot say this, it should not be tantamount to contempt. This is what the government council said before the court, something which even government officials can pay. That's the statement he made before the court. Please don't take this statement seriously. I'm only quoting who somebody saying the statement. It's not my statement. So it is that low, money of that low an order. Such is the, so it's not gaining momentum. Kerala is the only state which is earning 5,000 or 6,000 crores out of it. Rest is not earning anything. So it's sole state struggling and it's not able to get through because of the composition. Therefore, 246A is not an answer for 54. It can neither travel back nor posit itself to say that I can even legislate through one. Nothing. It is actually a good case. But whether you will succeed or not, my advice here again, as I said, second 2 cases, I chose it for this reason. You file writ petition for bad cases. Don't file writ petition for good cases. You better fight the cases. Because it ultimately requires a constitutional amendment to bring in, if required, and of course you need 2/3 states cooperation, all that is there. But I fear, knowing the circuitous process, it is, the court may lean in interpreting it in some way and say, under these exceptional cases, to render justice under Article 142, you can get anything. And they can say this levy is sustainable. Because in Kerala alone, it has an impact of 16,000 crores pending demands. You can imagine rest of the states and rest of the country. So it is very difficult to win this case before a court. But you can try your luck for bad cases, not for good cases. Pradeep, I'll take questions now. 6:50
yes,
now.
sir.
Hey, Balaji?
I request our participants, whoever has any question, to kindly raise your hands and we can ask questions one by one.
No questions. Bye, Margpa.
Natarajan sir has come up with.
Oh,
Yes, sir, Natarajan sir.
Silence by our own colleagues na enga kudin terli adnal ta kekren.
Sir, you have taken 2 major legal issues, very major. Both of it involves a lot of interpretation and research.
So in one day, you are given such a heavy dose, and it will take some time for us to digest both and come out with positives. I think that is what the reason for people not immediately raising their hands. So it has to sink in our mind for some time. And by the way, on the two important issues, on the first issue, you categorically told that even though legally we may be on a very good footing, considering the risk involved, at any point of time the government may amend it or retrospective amendment also.
Pradeep, I'm not able to hear.
Yeah. Shall I repeat?
Yeah.
Natarajan sir,
please.
your voice is not audible.
No, it's clear now.
Yeah,
That's clear now.
Yeah.
Yes,
and
sir.
the first part, that's what I said. You have taken two major issues which involves heavy interpretation. So it will take some more time for us to digest and understand and come back with other questions. So by the way, on the first issue, on the clubs, it was your advice, even though it is a very fine legal interpretation, practically it is not advisable to tell anybody to stop paying, and it is better to pay it because at any point of time the government can come out with an amendment even with a retrospective effect. Your view is the same for the second issue also, because that also, as you said, substantially involves a huge amount of revenue, as you said.
One difference, Nuts. In the second case, it requires an amendment not just by the parliament, but also consent by 2/3 of the state. But all the 2/3 of the state, they will pass it to the GST council through their ministers and get it validated.
But if each one of them is going to have some 16,000 crores of demand, it is not 2/3. They will get 100% majority.
100%.
So, as lawyers, it is very good interpretation, but ultimately, what will happen to the assessee is doubtful.
Correct. Because we are not talking in trade body, I chose these two cases.
Yeah.
It's for,
Thank you.
We have to be very careful. Bad cases, you still try your luck. At least, but good cases, don't recommend them under this route. And especially union levies, be very, very skeptical, because they will easily find, in fact, we are arguing a huge batch of cases on royalty in both Jaipur and Jodhpur High Court. It's such a fantastic points on constitution, where when they amended through section 17 of 101 amendment, they have amended 84, they have amended 54, 62, 52, everything. But there are several entries which has still not been amended. And they are all taxing entries, either by the union or by the state. So royalty is one such. So can you bring royalty into GST? It's a moot question on law. A very interesting question, for which again you have lot of case laws. Palkiwala sir has argued this. Naniji in his 100th year, we should remember him. All tax lawyers should stand up every day for a minute and then pay our obeisance for Palkiwala. They're celebrating the 100th year of his life. So he has visualized this problem 40 years back. He has canvassed that these questions can come at a later point of time. What a man. So this looks to be a good case in law. But how do we advise a client who comes for a big stay? Any temporary stay, if APS agrees for a stay, let's get some stay and then run up for a temporary period. Sundaresan irukara inniki? Irukara. Yeah. Ungalalla yaare uttadu ulla. Thank you so much, please. Please go ahead. Anything else? Yeah, I finished 10 minutes before, yeah.
Raghavan wanted to ask some question. I saw in the screen.
Okay, then if there are no other questions, then I'll touch one more subject, even though there is no PPT, because we have 10 more minutes, provided all of you have time.
Yes, sir.
No, I want to say something.
Tell you, Ramesh.
This case is like, normally we say, operation successful, the patient died. This is operation failed and patient successfully survived.
Correct.
Am I audible?
I'm waiting for the fees to come. Then I will give the opinion about in the line.
Prithvi, am I audible?
Nice.
Yes.
Sir, I have actually a couple of questions.
Yeah.
I'll go one by one maybe. Sir, I completely understand the part that while entry 54 has been repealed,
yes,
and there is no residuary power for the states, and also there is no article like 246A to which the states can trace back its power to legislate. And with the repeal of the VAT enactment, insofar as other goods are concerned, and also the fact that Section 19 is more like a saving clause for a year. Leaving all those apart, I completely understand that there is no constitutional basis for the levy to be extended, and including collection. That's the point through 265. Because now what they're endeavoring to do is not levying but collecting.
Yeah.
And 265 says for both of it, there should be power.
All the three: levy, assessment, collection. All the three.
Assessment and collection. Though 265 talks about levied and collected, which will also partake the assessment into its ambit. So I understand that part, sir. But on the part that whether this supply which is there, can it trace back to 246A? I think the way I understood it is we are not going to see Section 7 as supply has still not become non-injurious like a sale. So therefore, we are not going to understand supply.
No. Let us concede the fact supply includes sale, and sale has a non-injurious meaning. I have no problem. I will agree up to that.
So
but the
therefore,
problem, traceable power, constitutional domain.
Yes, sir. So I'm coming to that, sir. So therefore, we don't understand supply through Section 7 of the GST Act, but we understand supply as it normally stands.
Correct.
Because it's used in the Constitution.
Correct.
Having said that, do we say that supply will not include a sale? But if we say that supply will otherwise include a sale, then when supply traces back to 246A, and of course both center and states have, that's a different matter. But now sale is also within the power of the state, indirectly through Article 246A, not through Section 7, but even on the general meaning of the word supply. Therefore, if it is to be argued for the state, can't the state argue like this? This is my first.
No. Yeah.
After you answer, I'll come to the second question.
No. This is precisely what Justice Naidu has said in the judgment. Supply includes sale, and therefore the constitutional power is with the states.
So there, I feel the error is they should not have taken the route of Section 7.
Yeah, no, he need not have. See, Section 7 is only an addition. The power is there in 246A itself, because it uses the expression tax on supply, and supply is defined to include sale. So let us understand that to that extent, Justice Naidu is right. We have no problem. But can state say even then that earlier VAT Act goes? Because earlier VAT Act was not under 246A, it is under entry 54. So you have to reenact the entire VAT Act under invoking the power under 246A and give retrospectivity to travel.
No, can we say therefore that is what is now done?
That is not.
GST. No, they are just concurrent.
No. There is a difference between legislative power, amendment power, and saving power. The law, the distinction is very clear and bright in our law. Saving is what you repeal. Legislation is using your power to enter into a field. Amendment is having entered the field and legislator, you are now making it adaptable with your own, whatever you want to do circumstantially. So legislation, amendment, and saving and repeal, they are four different distinct powers. So your saving cannot tantamount to legislation. So 246A is not a route available to them. But the fear is if some court is going to hold it, as bold as Justice Nariman, somebody writes a judgment. Next day, GST Council will trigger it to Parliament of the states and get the resolution passed online through a Zoom. That's all.
Maybe a short-lived relief. Mostly you presume sometimes the government gives us a succor also.
The only succor we can still have. That's why we are saying you try your bad cases. Why the succor could be, we can still fight for interest and penalty for the back pay.
That is separate. Person. I am still on constitutionality. Sir, my second question here is, Article 367, can that be just brushed aside when it borrows the entirety of General Clause Act, which also includes Section 6? No. And therefore, repeal and saving is also covered through Article 367. Can we just say that is an interpretation?
Now, I'll give you two answers. One answer, as I said, we did a detailed research on Article 367 while reading Article 370, while delivering the speeches on the Kashmir issue. And also there's a writ petition, some counter to be filed by the union. We assisted them with some data. So 367 is so unique that these are all structured, read with the presidential proclamation and powers. If you see the genesis of 367 as a whole. 2, 367 is only an interpretation and not a saving or repeal. You can use 367, you can use General Clauses Act to interpret a provision of law. You cannot use General Clauses Act through 367 to save a law. There is a difference between, see, suppose man includes women. There is some expression. What does General Clauses Act says? Union General Clauses Act and the state, the expressions found in an enactment are not defined. You can go to the General Clauses Act. So you go to the General Clauses Act, take it as a tool to interpret. Interpreting is different from General Clauses Act used for saving. So you can do only interpretation under 367. It's the second point. And the most important third point is assuming you can do it. We argued that. That is what proposition 4 and 5 is. We said sunset clauses, you can't have General Clauses Act. And again, between an omission and substitution, you can't have General Clauses Act. So even if you want to invoke General Clauses under 367, that will not fit into the present scheme of things was also argued and agreed. Justice Naidu agrees on this. Okay.
So thank you, sir. Sir, next question. Yes, sir.
Sorry, sir. Sir, I got it, sir. I say we are basically also relying on the marginal note, and also, like, there's also one leg of your argument is to say that 367 borrows General Clauses Act only for the purpose of interpretation.
And second is, even if you invoke, you can't invoke it for these cases.
I got the next line of that. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Raghavan, sir. Sir, next question, Appa wants to ask, sir.
Oh, Enger kar tale kaat sunne. Hey, Pramod ji.
One second, sir. Just unmute.
Good evening, Pa. Cholunga, Pramod.
Good evening, Pramod here.
Cholunga. How are you?
Sir, basic doubt, small. I do not see if the proposition is accepted that after 15/9/17 all levy will become bad. If that is accepted by Supreme Court, because there is no saving a repeal, as you said. What will happen to the refund that are due by the revenue? Whether that will also lapse?
Yeah. And you don't have unjust enrichment law in any of the state legislations, unlike the central excise law. So, and all these are writ petitions. So, you can possibly hang and sustain on equity to some extent. See, the difference between a writ remedy and a statutory remedy is, even without unjust enrichment law, in writ petitions, courts have always followed equitable doctrine and said that taxes paid and will not be refunded. And you always have under 142 the special power, which Supreme Court every time exercises. In the Sovyani organization judgment, where the levy is held unconstitutional, they have always protected the past refunds and the past recoveries as valid under 142.
Okay, that is one thing. Otherwise, suppose any due that is before legislation, after 15/9/17, any proceeding has been passed refunding that amount. So whether
for once padam kuduthirukeenga, don't ask. You never give money at all. Adu gone.
Thank you.
நாங்க உங்களுக்கு பணம் போட்டா திருப்பதி உண்டியல், நீங்க எங்களுக்கு பணம் கொடுத்தா அது எங்களோட பேங்க், வரவே வராது அப்புறம்.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sir, good evening, sir. Prabhakar.
சொல்லுங்க, என்னடா கேள்வி கேட்காம இருக்கீங்களே, நானே நீங்க ஜட்ஜியே கேக்குற ஆளு, கேள்வி கேக்குற ஆளு.
Sir, இல்ல sir, question itself will take a few minutes. I was wondering whether I should ask at all.
Please, sir.
With your permission, 5 minutes, sir.
எனக்கு ஒண்ணும் இல்ல, as long as the rest are okay, I'm perfectly fine.
Sir, that 2 minutes question, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, actually, the first one is, I'm fully with your Sheen Gold case, because I know the kind of arguments, number of days you were in Kerala court, in and out, division bench, all of that. This is my question number 1. If your Sheen Gold is right, that means, can I say conversely that the draftsman or the parliament or whoever wrote the law made a Himalayan blunder? That is first question, sir. Yes or no? Either should be right or they have committed a blunder.
In spite of APS and Sundaresan being here, emphatic Himalayan, yes.
Yes, sir. Thanks a lot. Yes, sir. So my second question is, sir, you said the source of power is derived from Article 246(3). Read with
no. This is 246A. GST is 246.
No, sir. That is the department's contention.
Yeah, VAT. Yeah.
246(3) originally read with 7th schedule, into entry 54. Then the local VAT Act in Kerala, whichever the state concerned. Correct. Now, if you go back, once it is repealed, then the power is lost. They can't do anything. This is perfectly fine. Equally, if this is true, it should also be true for central excise duty, which is again 246(1), read into 7th schedule, then read into serial number 84, entry serial number 84, yes, into central excise act.
The only problem there is in Ujagar Prince, Justice Venkatachalaya, who remains to be one of the greatest living legend Chief Justice of India. At 89, he keeps traveling and delivering lectures now, even now. He's a great scholar. See, he has written this Ujagar Prince judgment, where he has brought out the principle of ragbag legislations, where he says, if something does not have an entry, but still there's a power traceable to the Constitution,
yes, sir,
especially in a tax matter,
yes,
then
sir,
consign it to entry 97. He has said so. But the bottleneck which the revenue still has to cross there is, when you have shrunk 84,
yes,
deliberately, and subsumed the power through a process, special process under 246A.
Yes, sir.
Your future is to go there. How can you say in the past can I retain it under entry 97 is something which needs to be argued, but it is debatable. We can win, we may lose, we don't know. It's debatable. But as far as entry 54, it's a sitter case.
That's what, sir. Now, if the logic of analogy of 84 has to, 54 has to apply, it would equally apply to 84.
Equally, one difference, we don't have residuary entry in list 2. We have a residuary entry in list 1.
Yes, sir. I'm coming to that only because from 1950 to 2017 June, excise duty was only under 84.
See, we have to fight for a judgment and get it when something has been deformed.
Yes, sir.
You can't consign a package to it under entry 97 is something that needs to be argued on one. There is no direct judgment to support it. That is the problem.
Fine. Okay. So the department can't say we will go to 97 all along for 60, 70 years.
No, Srinivas is ready already. 97 times.
So that's the difference between 84 and 54.
That's a slight ticklish area.
Okay.
We will be educating both Sundaresan and Srinivasan here.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot. It's excellent presentation. Thanks a lot.
I already searched Article 367(1) because last time keeping quiet.
You want to invoke general classes, you can't invoke.
I already posted the question. Constitutional lawyers have to research.
So this will come up immediately after lockdown lifting, sir.
Will come for reply.
Before the division bench.
Division bench has heard it.
Yes, sir.
Reserved it 6 months back, but now I think by now the judge senior judge would have retired.
That Justice Abdul
Rahim would have retired. Wonderful judge. Retired at Nani.
But you have to do it all over again, sir.
Okay. They will say they will better pay tax, sir. Why are you coming every time?
Okay. Thank you, Jyota, sir.
Yes, sir. Thanks, sir.
Sir, with your permission, sir, there are 2 more questions, sir.
Yeah, I can.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
Hello, sir.
Yes, sir. Parthasarthi, our junior member, sir, he wants to ask a question. Yeah. Go ahead, Parthasarthi.
Sir, I have one doubt, sir. This pertains to Section 19 of the Constitution 101st Amendment Act. Now, the Constitution 101st Amendment Act deals with 2 particular aspects. So, one is that the provision states that after expiry of 1 year, the law ceases to exist, or the existing law ceases to exist as it does. And two, it also provides that before the expiry of 1 year, the law may be amended.
Yeah.
Now, after the 101st Amendment, what happens is, this is in light of the Gujarat High Court decision, Reliance Industries, that came recently. So now the Gujarat High Court says that the state does not have powers to amendment the VAT law either under Entry 54, because Entry 54 has been shrink now, or under 246A, because 246A exclusively envisages power only to enact GST law.
Correct.
When such being the case, isn't that part of Section 19, which empowers the state to amend the law, become redundant?
No, amend the law in its lifetime, not after its lifetime. That is the difference.
Okay.
It's a superb question. Youngster, I welcome it. Very nice question.
Thank you, sir.
Amendment during its life,
Okay.
not post its annihilation.
Okay. Okay, sir.
They are coterminous. That's the only difference.
Okay.
And Kerala High Court was the first to deliver the judgment. In Kerala, they see, that's why I said there are 4 powers: legislation, amendment, saving, and repeal. Repeal and saving. They are distinct powers. All are sovereign powers, natural powers, but they are distinct powers.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Patsardi. Sir, I think we are done with all the questions, sir.
Okay.
May I now call upon Sendil Kumar, sir, to deliver the vote of thanks?